I'm Michael Harrison. Welcome to Up Close, Far Out, a show for communications professionals, pop culture aficionados, political junkies, media freaks, science enthusiasts, fans of radio, followers of technology, and the philosophically curious. If you find this show to be of interest and value, please subscribe to it and give it a like. My guest today is one of America's leading radio talk show hosts. He ranks number 8 in the nation on the Talker's prestigious Heavy 100. He's heard late afternoons and early evenings on WOAI in San Antonio and across the nation on more than 170 radio stations. He began his professional media career as a TV news anchor before evolving into a radio talker. He's also one heck of a musician who learned to work the saxophone, and he plays just what he feels. His name is Joe Pagliarulo, but his friends and listeners know him as Joe Pags. Here we go. Yeah, you've been doing this split screen stuff for a long time.
Yeah.
And, it's very interesting. These video podcasts, if you don't get too fancy, if you stay within a certain realm, I don't know, maybe you don't feel this way. If you don't get too fancy, it comes across as an underground form of talk radio. If you get too fancy, it becomes cheesy television. Have you thought about that process as you've evolved? You're one of the pioneers in this genre.
Yeah, oddly, well, it's an interesting question. About 19 years ago, when I started doing some form of video, it was like Yahoo video, something that was very, very primitive. I thought to myself, as somebody who's been on television for a long time, how can I take talk radio to that realm while not affecting badly what I do on talk radio? And what I mean by that is the radio show is the priority. It always has been. And it's still got to come off as a great radio show where people generally will use theater of the mind to try to figure out what I look like and why do we sound like this and what are we talking about and am I painting the picture of the story well enough? But now that we have the video aspect, if you choose to, you can also watch it. Does that affect negatively the radio show? And the answer is no. Do we get overly complicated? No. We do produce it like a TV show, but we always want to make sure that the foundation isn't badly affected by it. So I think that you make a good point. That if you overcomplicate and have big things swooping in and big noises being made and big alerts happening, I think that changes what it is that we do. So I'm mindful every day that we're doing the show as a great radio show that you can watch if you want to, if that makes sense.
And we have microphones in front of us. In my
Yeah.
case, I'm wearing the headphone.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I did a program with Bill O'Reilly a couple of weeks ago in
was
this
great.
oh, you saw it. Thank you. Up Close, Far Out, this new series I'm doing. And I think it was the first one that we did with the split screen. And I'm sitting here in my den, I don't mean the den of my house. I mean the den of the Talkers building.
Right.
And, we have the studio and it's very radio-ish and headphones and the microphone. And he pops up on the other side in front of his well, you have the stuff in the background too, but
Yeah.
you're sitting with a microphone with the tie and the suit. And there was a clash of media cultures going on.
Yes.
I hadn't thought about it. And then a couple of media consultants told me, they said, something like, well, you shouldn't be in a situation like that. If you have a guest that is wearing a suit and a tie and has the big background and the whole anchor look, the television anchor look, you should be able to go to your green screen and assume the same thing so that your guest doesn't have dominance over you.
I disagree with them. I disagree. I'll give you a story. If you want a quick story, I was invited to be on Newsmax. I was on yesterday, but I was invited 2 years ago. And the audio person got in my ear and said, "Can you move that big microphone out of your face?" I said, "That's exactly how you're hearing me. What are you talking about? This is literally the way my voice is being conveyed to you." And they went, "Oh," I think they thought it was a prop. So
Right.
The clash of the two titans is real, but I think you and I have the same perspective. Broadcasting is broadcasting is broadcasting. And if you're doing something that's worthy of the audience hearing or seeing it, it doesn't matter really that you're wearing, a red shirt, I'm wearing a pink shirt. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that I'm in a studio with my silly little Joe Pags thing in the background, or if you've had headphones on. I think those who are consuming it for what it offers, not what they see necessarily, if that makes sense.
Well, it makes a lot of sense, although I do think it's a concern. I go all the way back to the days when we started playing albums on FM.
Yes,
We were very, very mindful not to talk over the music, not to have jingles, not to have echo, not to have anything that was the razzmatazz of
right.
commercial radio. And I'm seeing the same thing happening again. I think some of the programs that are on YouTube today, they remind me of the days of underground radio,
Yeah.
that there's something about the Spartan simplicity of the broadcast that gives it more credibility, because you're seeing some programming that doesn't reek of corporate control.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Well, I do. It's interesting because when you say that, I actually visualize an underground where people are going. We have to get the information out, and this is how we're going to do it. And I think that that's very, very attractive because, as you said, people, I think, even if it's not true, will perceive a very polished, a very zing zangy thing that they could tune into as controlled by some overlord. Whereas a guy in his den, telling the truth the way he sees it, or observing and then conveying what he's seen, I think that makes them feel like they're part of a secret group that is getting the real information. Well, I got the real information. You're watching that ABC, NBC, CBS stuff. I've got the real stuff from Michael Harrison. I think that that's attractive to people because for a long time we were told what to believe. Now you can go and pick and choose from 10 million different outlets that are now, grabbing their iPhone and saying things into a microphone. I think that you're hitting on something that's real, but at the same time, I don't think it makes us defunct. I don't think it makes us any less important. I think there's room for all of it. I don't think it's a zero-sum game, but you're right. I think that people more and more are feeling like they're more included if they check out what Michael Harrison's doing. Hey, you got to see this guy, Michael Harrison, what he's doing. It's really something different.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing. I'll be honest with you. I don't think it bothers what we do historically because I think what we do is still very valuable.
Yeah, well, I think it's all a very good thing too, and that's why I'm having a ball exploring it and
Yeah.
playing with it. And
You're very good at it. Yeah.
you're very kind to say that. You are one of the best at it. So
Thank
coming
you.
from you, that's a compliment. But I was just thinking as you were talking, I realized you were once a television anchor guy.
Yes.
And if I'm correct, you broke into the business from the television side. I mean,
I did.
you sat at a desk and you wore the tie and you had the voice and your hair was probably a little darker.
It was a lot
And
darker.
and uh, what a transition! I mean, you're not the only guy from TV who's gone to radio, but you're one of a handful who've gotten as far as you have. And
Yeah.
for those who are just tuning in, I mean, you're one of the top hosts in America, according to our research, which
Thank
is
you.
among the best. So, w- talk a little bit about the transition of being a TV anchor and now, being on the cutting edge, both on radio and video.
Well, I appreciate you bringing it up. I was a television news anchor for I think 14 years, either an anchor or a reporter. And last I was at WRGB in the capital region of New York, in Schenectady, Albany, Schenectady, Troy. 6 and 11 o'clock Monday through Friday guy. I wore makeup, did about an hour and 5 minutes a day. Wore a suit, as you said, and I was this corporate sort of guy that. I mean, I still did the best I could possibly do. I've won tons of journalism awards. I know how to do it. But I found myself to be stifled. And the arguments we were having in the newsroom, although I think beneficial for a better newscast, were getting kind of stupid, in my opinion. What's funny, Michael, I'm a conservative guy, as you know, but when I first hit the era in Albany, and before that I was all over Michigan. I was 8 years in Michigan doing television news. But in Albany, the first night I was on, I got an email from a guy who said, great, another liberal on the air. So I found that to be actually refreshing because that meant that I was being very unbiased and even-handed. He had no idea what my politics actually were. But I found it to be very, very restrictive. You had an A block where you did sort of the real news. B block, a little lighter news. C block was the weather, and then you had the sports, and then you did a fluff piece at the end. It wasn't as satisfying to me as a broadcaster and as an inquisitive guy as doing talk radio and long form is. 3 hours a day, 5 days a week is a much different animal. You've got to really have your stuff together. I've got 37 topics going into every show. I probably use 3 or 4, but I've got all these things that I could get to, and it's all on my time. It's all from my perspective. And television news is restrictive. What's funny is, though, because you said you went from television to radio, most people think that I got demoted who are in the business, who think that television is somehow better. You and I know that it's not. But having said that, I left corporate television and controlled television to do what I do now and then possibly get back on television doing what I do. And we've sort of done that. It's TV to radio to TV to, hey, this guy's just a broadcaster, which is what I want to be.
I think the only one who really understood what you're saying, aside from the fact that obviously you and I understand it because we're talking about it,
Right.
was Rush Limbaugh,
Yes.
who used to say, "Why would I go on that show? Why would I run to be on that when I have a bigger audience?"
Yes.
I call it, and I've observed this in radio broadcasters for decades. I call it an affliction that I've described as Screenis Envy.
That's pretty good. I
It
like
is.
that.
It's
Yeah.
funny. I've seen broadcasters who have these massive radio shows.
Yeah.
And of course, this was more profound going back years before we had this vibrant, robust underground, video radio,
Yes.
hybrid going on. And there could be a blizzard outside, and they get off the air on their big radio show, and then they'll drive 30 miles in the blizzard to be on some cable public access television
Yes.
show, and somehow feel because they're on TV, this is a bigger deal. Yeah, I could see where people would think you were demoted, but that's not necessarily true. I mean, there is.
And by the way, I left my contract a year early. I could have stayed there. I left because I met with Gabe Hobbs, who happened to come to town. We had lunch, and he said, "Dude, you got to get back into radio." And that's really what launched my want to get back into radio. And soon thereafter, I was in San Antonio, where Clear Channel at the time was based. They said, "Hey, go and do the morning show in San Antonio. You'll be here. You'll be heard by all the big people in the company." And that was true. And what's interesting, and you know this, back then Clear Channel owned TV and radio, so we had WOAI radio and WOAI TV. So I do the morning show, walk down the hall, do a hit on television, go back and finish my morning show from 5 to 9 a.m. Then from 9 to 11, I do KTRH in Houston via ISDN. Then I go to the TV station and I do a report for the TV station. So it was all this big, let's have symmetry not symmetry, but let's all work together in this one big corporate umbrella.
Synergy.
Synergy was the word. Man, that was the big word back then. Synergy in the company. Then, of course, iHeartMedia became a thing and Clear Channel sold off and whatever. But to me, that was almost 20 years ago. That was, for me, the launch of my ideas as a broadcaster. And again, I'll say this again, just to be very clear. The foundation of all of that is the talk show, is that I have the ability to self-produce, say what I want for 3 hours. If the audience likes it, I'll keep my job. If they don't, I'll be moving on to buy a truck. So that to me was, I never thought to myself, if my face isn't on a screen, I'm less than. That was never that big a deal for me. But doing all of it also makes sense if you've got the tools, I think.
I go back to the days when there was the debate in broadcasting whether a disc jockey. There were no talk show hosts. So talk show hosts were just oddities.
Right.
If you were a disc jockey, a radio personality, the debate among the theorists was: is it smart to have people know what you look like? Because they'll invariably be disappointed. There was always, you always heard people, when the DJ would come down to the gym at school and DJ the hop.
Right.
He's a geek.
Right. Right. It's funny when I used to have Dennis Miller on my show a lot. And I haven't talked to Dennis in a while, but he would come on. We'd do a great hit. It was really fun. One day we had an event in Houston. I was doing the morning show on KPRC and the afternoon show on WAI at the same time, doing 7 hours of radio a day for some crazy reason. And Dennis was doing an event, and we met for the first time. He said, "You're Joe Pags? You look kind of nice." I was like, "Well, what did you expect?" So, I mean, that's exactly right. Most people think I'm 5'1" and 300 pounds and the voices with the microphone. And it's interesting because you're right. Am I glad that they now know what I look like? Does that spoil what they thought I looked like as they listened on the way home? I think that still is a question. But as you said, with video more prevalent now, it's not as much a thing as it used to be.
When you were a kid, did you know you had a good voice?
Yes, I tell the story often, and I'm not making this up. This is a true story. I woke up one day when I was 13. I didn't do the whole in between, where the voice change thing happens. And I said, "Mom, what's for breakfast?" in this voice. And she said, "Knock it off." I mean, she literally was mad at me. She said, "Stop it." I said, "I don't know what happened, but this is what you get." So I got very lucky. People think it's from years of smoking. It's not. People think that I developed it through radio. I didn't. When I used to work at Domino's Pizza, I'd say, "Thank you for choosing Domino's Pizza. Would you like to try the extravaganza?" And they would say, "Is this a recording? What is this?" I'd say, "Well, no. Do you want a pizza or not?" So I just got very lucky. And I think that in life, we all have some sort of special talent, special thing, special gift. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize what it was. I got lucky. I found out what it was pretty early on. And I'm not better than anybody else. I just happened to say, okay, I can probably use this to my advantage.
Well, you also have an ability that takes advantage of the voices. That you're a good singer. You have a
Thank you.
very and I dabble in singing, but and I occasionally can pull it off, but my range is this narrow. If I stay within my range,
Yeah,
I can pull it off. You have a larger range, and singing is very different than talking.
it
It's a
is.
different part of the brain, I think, don't you?
Well, I don't. I actually don't think it's a different part of the brain. And here's why I say that. I was a music major in college. I was not a communications guy. I was a saxophone performance major and a voice minor. And my mom often says, and God bless her, she says, Joey, and only she can call me Joey. Joey, you speak like you sing. You actually phrase things similarly because of the music that's just in you. And I get that. I don't think about it when I'm speaking, but you really do put it in a phrase like you would a song. If you break the song up in the wrong way, and I've heard you sing very well. If you break the song up in the wrong way, even if you're singing in tune and using proper vibrato or whatever, it doesn't come off right. You've got to phrase it the right way to get people to where you want them to go. I think in what we do in talk radio, it lends itself to that. But it's funny when I'll do a live stream somewhere outside of my talk show, I'll do content, I'll do controversy, I'll do argument and debate. And then before I go, Michael, I will sing some songs for the audience. And they really seem to get that. They're like, man, I don't like your politics, but I'm going to follow you because I like that you sang to us at the end of it. So for me, it's all intermingled. And I do think that, and I don't know if it's a left right brain thing. You could be right about that. But I think the phrasing and how you communicate is the same through music as it is through voice. I think we literally are using our voices in such a way that they're not just hearing the words, we're conveying to them emotion and feeling. And I think it's all sort of the same thing.
Yeah, the problem for me is when I reach for that note, I think I hit it, then I listen back and it's flat, flat. I have never had the problem of talking flat.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing flat. If anything, I might be too sing-songy in the
No,
way I talk.
I don't
People,
think so.
but I always admired. I was involved in theater back in school. I still love theater. And,
Yes.
in some alternate universe, I'm an actor and I'm a dancer and a singer.
Sure.
I thought the epitome of what I could possibly do someday when I grew up would be to do like what Robert Preston did in The Music Man.
Yes.
Trouble right here, or Rex Harrison, no relation,
Yes.
in My Fair Lady. I've grown accustomed to her face.
No, wonderful. Absolutely.
And talk singing. So
Yes.
but it's all pretty interesting. I want to back up a second. You mentioned Gabe Hobbs.
Yeah.
For those watching this, Gabe Hobbs is he's still in the business as far as I know. A very active programmer. Was an executive in the business, and
Yes.
he influenced you. And you went to San Antonio, where you've been now. You're based in San Antonio.
I am.
What's San Antonio like in a state dominated by Houston and, of course, Dallas, and then that weird place called Austin?
Yeah.
And I remember watching, Disney World, Disneyland on TV with Davy Crockett and the Alamo, and all these Mexicans climbing up the ladders,
Right.
that whole thing. And what's the state of the city in the state of Texas?
It's interesting because we here in Texas are a very red state, but as you know, the cities that you mentioned are very, very blue. You've got Houston and Dallas and San Antonio and Austin and El Paso are all very blue, surrounded by a red state. So there's a real dichotomy here in the state of Texas. San Antonio is a great city. It's a great city. It's always going to be a great city. But when you get into the government of it, it is abjectly, directly opposite of what it is that I believe in a lot of ways. But then again, there are a lot of people in my area that believe the way that I believe. But the city of San Antonio itself is culturally pretty amazing. I think many people will give it the Mexican flavor that you, of course, very wisely observe. But it's also got a very strong German influence. The founding of the city of San Antonio was German, and it was Mexican, then it was Texican, then it was, the Alamo, of course, is what we're famous for. Then there's the Riverwalk, and the Spurs are a very big deal here. It is a city that if you walk a block, you can find a very different perspective on everything. And I think that's very good in many ways. Like you mentioned, Austin is little Portland. That's what it is. And then you've got the government there that is all Republican. That's in the middle of Austin, which is, again, sort of a very Texas thing. I think that Texas in and of itself acts as a very, very different place than most states I've ever been, in that, as I said, you can meet 5 people on the street and get 5 different perspectives, 5 different flavors, and 5 different sort of personalities.
Are you finding people are moving to Texas and that there's a transience there? I remember when I moved out to California, where I spent about 15 years of my life,
Right.
the natives were hard to find. Everybody, either you're from here or from there, and whatever. I spent a lot of time in Florida. That's the same thing there. Texas. Is very exotic to me. I've been there a number of times, but I've
Yeah.
never lived in Texas. Do you find in Texas that there's a lot of people who are not Texans?
Yes. A lot, and you know how you can tell because they're smart. They're changing their license plates quickly when they get here. Because if you don't, you're going to get a look. But I know that they're not from Texas because of how they drive. They really drive very, very differently. I don't know if it's from California or from Michigan or from New York or from Illinois, wherever they're coming from. They drive very differently. You can always tell. They're generally speaking left lane drivers, Michael. They won't get out of the way. They're driving 60 and a 70, and they won't get out of the way. You can always tell that's a new person here. What I like is that when they're coming here, it feels as though they realize why they came. You know, very low sales tax, not low sales tax, very low income tax, like zero state income tax. And the business climate here is very, very good to get yourself going and starting up. California has lost a ton of business, a lot of it because of Elon Musk, but even Apple's making computers in Austin now. So people are coming here to save money, do business, and I don't think they get the Texan way yet. It takes them a while, if that makes sense. I
Well,
think they still have their sensibilities. They think Texas is the same as where they came from, and it's not. Like I said a minute ago, it's a very, very unique place that eventually you realize, oh, this is how they do it.
okay. Well,
That
I
makes sense.
guess my question was, is there a Texas way? I mean,
Yes.
that's huh.
And,
And
and to describe it, I probably couldn't, but I've been here 19 years now. Originally from New York, grew up in Florida, spent a lot of time in Michigan. This is a very, very different place in a great way, in a wonderful way. I think that the mix of cultures here is so stark that it's surprising. You almost have to live here. I think when you come and visit, you do the Riverwalk, you do a big steak, you do some Tex-Mex, and then you go home. Well, when you live here, it's actually a very, very different place. You know, there's a hill country. There are lakes all over the place. There are boating, fishing, people jet skiing, but also people who are bringing industry here and making way more money than they would where they came from because of the tax climate and so on. But I just think the atmosphere here, you have to live here to get it. And I think the saying is, I wasn't born in Texas, but I got here as quickly as I could. It takes a long time to realize why it's different. You know that it is, but once you get the Texas way, you get it. But I don't know that I can describe it in words very well.
but you don't walk around with a cowboy hat or anything like that, do you? Or do you?
Funny story. The Oak Ridge Boys like my show. And I was actually contacted by Joe Bonsall, who was the guy who sang lead on Elvira, just passed away recently, sadly. He saw me on Newsmax and tweeted to me and said something like facts or truth or something like that. And we became fast friends. I had him on the show. And then when they came to town, I went. And Michael, I'm not a cowboy boots guy. I'm not a cowboy hat guy, but I put on my cowboy boots and my cowboy hat that night. And I went and I met with the Oak Ridge Boys backstage. I actually announced them, you know, at the Brontex Theater here in New Braunfels, Texas. So I'm not the guy who walks around, generally speaking, with the cowboy hat and the boots on. But I think when it's appropriate, I do have them in the closet. It's a long answer to your very simple
And you
question.
see cowboy hats and cowboy boots
All over the place.
and
Generally
oh,
speaking, when
yeah.
there's a guy driving a big pickup truck, his cowboy hat is here on the dashboard.
Uh,
When he stops, puts it on, and goes about his business. That is very prevalent here.
I just want to switch gears now to other subjects, and one of the other subjects we've actually touched upon, and that is our mutual love of music, and
Yes.
each of us have a background in it. I want to mention for the folks watching that we do this annual convention, this annual conference of people from broadcasting called the Talkers Conference, and you participated in it one year doing the national anthem, the Star Spangled Banner, on your sax via remote. You did it on
Right.
video, and then the next year you did it in person,
Yes.
and both were magnificent.
Thank you.
And I know that you talk about music as you just, you know, as evidence. We just talked about music. One of the issues that is always debated in the business of talk radio is the role of politics as a subject, as a focal point.
Yeah.
Whether there's too much of it, too little of it, what else should be talked about? Should a radio station be all political? Should it all be the same point of view? You know, and all of that. The game is played the way the game is scored.
Yeah.
So you keep people tuned in to hear what they want to hear. Um, Where are you at right now when it comes to coming up with subjects other than politics to work them into your program? And of course, we've created the image that you're sitting there doing whatever you want. You've got hundreds of radio stations that you are carried on. You have to think about what they want their stations to be like too, which has got to put you sometimes make you crazy.
Yeah.
What are the subjects? What's your position on other subjects being in the mix? And what are some of the subjects that you really like to talk about when you have an opportunity that you don't normally get to talk about because of the focus on politics?
Such a great question. I love interviewing people that I've looked up to my entire life. I love interviewing people outside the realm of politics, and with the lead up to the election, it's going to be all politics all the time, because that people are dying to know what happened while they were at work today, politically speaking. But I'll give you an example. I interviewed Bill Medley from the Righteous Brothers, and Bill Medley, like you, like me, has a deeper voice. So I've always connected with the guy. When he was singing with Bobby Hatfield, I couldn't sing the Bobby parts; I could sing the Bill Medley parts. So I tried to get him on the program, and I contacted his people, and they said, absolutely not, he's never coming on. And I think that they probably looked me up and said he's a political commentator or something like that, which I'm not. I'm a guy who hosts a talk show, but when I get into politics, I'm a conservative guy. My show is not a political show, although politics does dominate a lot of times. So long story short, they said he's never coming on, don't ever ask again. Back to my connection with the Oak Ridge Boys. The guy who was managing the Oak Ridge Boys, hey, can this guy come on? Can that guy come on? And hey, would you ever interview Bill Medley? I said, what? The guy from the Righteous Brothers? Yes. He's going back on tour. I said, he's like 86 or something. Yeah, he's going back on tour. He'd love to come on. Absolutely. We had him on. And Michael, I did 2 or 3 parts with him. And it was just nothing but the joy of music, the joy of the road in the 1960s when 2 young guys from California did Little Lat Loopy Loo and all this stuff. And it was so magical for me as a host that I was able to do that. And the reaction I got from the audience was, I love your show. I love your commentary, but man, that was great. And that really gets me going. That keeps my juices flowing. And I think that I'm able to do that in such a way because of my musical background, because I've idolized the guy like that. Yet I can talk to him on a level where, who's this guy? And why did that voice, that deep voice, work with the high voice? And why is You've Lost That Love and Feeling the most listened to song ever recorded in history? And doing things like that away from politics gives me that respite, and at the same time allows me to stretch my legs as an interviewer, asking questions I know every one of those hundreds of stations that you mentioned will get something out of. And that's, to me, that's the pleasure of what we do. Politics necessary because it's what people are hunger for, especially in a cycle like now. But to do something like that, I think that's a gift that people like you and I have, to talk to people like that.
Also talking to somebody that you grew up with,
Yes.
You never close your eyes.
Absolutely. Sing it, Michael. Get it. That was awesome.
The reason I do that is because I can remember, I'm significantly older than you, and I was a kid listening to Top 40 radio when that song came out.
Right.
And I can remember, I'm one of those kids that remembers where he was and what he was doing when he heard certain songs for the first time and what the DJ said. And when that song came on the radio in its day, I mean, most people didn't hear it in its day. They've heard it subsequently as a golden oldie. Wow, that wall of sound, Phil Spector, and these
unbelievable.
Guys
the strings that he added, all that stuff was amazing. That song was such a groundbreaker. And I don't want to age you because you look like you're younger than I am, but I think the song came out 2 years before I was born. So that's the interesting part of it. But talking to him about that experience, and I really did. I mean, I was like a kid. And Michael, I looked at him and I said, we had it on video, so we're looking at each other, and I said, "What the hell made you think your deep voice could work with that guy?" And he said, "I don't know, man, but it just worked." I mean, it was just going through that. Can you imagine? Nobody on this planet would say, let's take a guy who's kind of a contralto. This guy, Bobby Hatfield, was singing notes that didn't make any sense. And then you've got this guy who's basically a bass/baritone. No way that works. And man, does it work.
And it worked again after I think Hatfield had already passed away. Medley had a monster hit with Jennifer Warnes.
Yes.
I Had the Time of My Life, and she played the part of the high voice.
Yes.
And the two of them, it was like a righteous brother and sister.
Yeah, just for the chronology of it, Bobby, I think, died 3 or 4 years after that. But you're right. And Bill Medley almost did. I got to send you this video. I got to send you my audio or video of this interview, because I asked him, I said, What made you think that that time of my life was the right one for you? And without your voice, that song doesn't do what it ended up doing. He said, Pags, I almost didn't do it. He literally turned them down 3 or 4 times for that song because his wife was pregnant with their child. So there's a great story that goes along with that. But again, Michael, you bringing this up, just it brings me joy now to talk about it because, again, I'm very good at what I do politically. I'm very good at taking issues and spelling it out and fact checking and everything else. But to do an interview like that, where it's just, let's talk music with Bill Medley and the stories behind Love and Feeling, the stories behind, and that's what he calls it. Doesn't call it You've Lost That. He just calls it Love and Feeling. And the story behind I've Had the Time of My Life, unbelievable. I mean, they literally were not going to do the song without Bill Medley, and Bill Medley said, "I'm not doing it." And you know what a big hit it ended up being. So that story it's a really good one, but great memory because it'd been 20 years since he had a #1 hit. It'd been a long, long time, and all of a sudden, without that voice, that song doesn't do that. And maybe that song actually helped the movie to do as well as it did from Dirty Dancing.
I think it did. I think they talk about synergy.
Yes,
That those two worked very well. I remember
exactly.
Jennifer Warnes. She did a duo with Joe Cocker that also
Yes,
went on to become a very big hit, and she sounded like the spitting image, if a voice can be an image, of
yes,
Linda Ronstadt. I I,
I
I
agree.
she sounded like Linda Ronstadt, which is not a
Yeah.
bad thing to sound like.
Yeah, the song is Up Where We Belong, and you should hear me try to sing that with this voice, but because Joe Cocker gets up there. But again, another one of those songs it's like an earworm, and it gives you a really a great pleasure to hear something just away from the fray. Just sing a song, sing some harmony, just enjoy the melody. And again, I mean, going back to what we talked about earlier, I do believe that what we do is melodic as well. And if it is melodic well enough, then the audience is going to come back. But I don't know, intertwining all of that. I mean, what a great question. What takes me away from the grind of what we generally do every day?
Mhm.
Talking to Bill Medley. That's my answer. Talking to Bill.
Right. Well, I just wish there was more conversation. I mean, I think the politics is great, and it's part of the First Amendment and freedom, and talk radio is a bellwether of American public opinion. It's all important, but sometimes, as the publisher of talkers and the bigger term of talk radio, and the great commonality that I have found knowing people on the left, on the right, in the middle, there's so much room for expansion. I I would love to see more topics discussed by some of the people that are in that groove of just talking about one kind of politics. I find tremendous interest in science, health, uh, space, physics,
Yes.
philosophy. There's a lot going on. In
Well, Michael,
conclusion, yeah,
I think there's room for all of that, if I may. Remember what Rush always said. The people would call in or write in, get to the topics. Get back to the topics. Why are you talking about that? Get to the topics. And
yeah.
as much as he wasn't swayed by the audience, and I'm not as much as maybe some others are, it still does get to you because people tune in, the P1s as we call them, tune in because they expect a certain thing. And when you don't give them that certain thing, they'll bark at you. So it's hard to sort of shut that noise off, but you couldn't be more right. I don't think I've ever lost one listener because I did an off topic. I don't think I've ever lost one listener because I talked about science or technology or mountains or weather. And I think that what you say is very, very valuable. We sometimes get into what my wife calls the tornado of the topics and the issues, and we can't get ourselves out of it. Once we do get out of it, we can do something really cool, like I talked about with Bill, and there are several others that I've interviewed I feel the same way about. So what you say is very, very valuable. I guess the meaning of my bringing this up is it's hard to get out of that cyclone. And
Oh,
once you
it's
do,
very
it's
hard.
great, but it's
It,
hard.
it's hard, and what you said, not to have the audience tell you what to do. We live in the era where audiences tell everybody what to do.
Right,
Look, especially on television, programs that have what's called canon. How would you like to be a Star Trek writer or producer now? The audience totally dominates where that
right,
show goes. They,
100%.
you get it? I mean, it's like all these groups out there, and all these people going, no, 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 you can't do that. You got to do this. And not only that, it's not only got to be politics, or it's not only got to be a certain space adventure, but it's got to be that niche within the niche that
It's so well said. Well, let me give you. So now you got to go, and I appreciate the time today, and thank you so much for having me on. I was at the gym in Lansing, Michigan, probably in the year 2000, and I used to on my television news broadcast. I do the news, then I do a 10-minute talk show at the end. We called On Point on television, and I was in the gym, and a guy walks up. He says, "You're that guy, right?" Yeah, yeah, I'm the guy. He said, I don't like that talk thing that On Point. I said, okay, that's good. I'm going to go work out. He said, well, unless it's a topic I'm interested in. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a call before I do it every night. Ask you what topic you're interested in, and then I'll do it that way. And he gave me this look like I was nuts. And I said, you see how crazy that sounds? If you like what I do, watch what I do, listen to what I do. And every once in a while it'll be a topic that you love, and sometimes it'll be a topic that you don't love as much. But if you like the product, you like the guy bringing it to you, that should be enough, right? And the guy understood. Unfortunately, we can't talk to everybody individually like that, but I think that's the mindset people have. And I think you know this better than anybody, especially in the world of podcasts now. You can, on demand, listen to or watch anything that you want. What they get lost in is you better be doing something that I want right now. And if you don't, I'm going to whine about it. If you can have this overview conversation, listen, if you like Michael and you like what he's bringing and you like his singing and you like his talk and perspective, give him a break if it's not something that you're 100% is a 10 on your list. Because next time he's going to do something that's going to blow you away. That's, I think, kind of the job, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I think so. And in conclusion, I hope that you have had fun talking about all the different stuff that we talked about, which is a departure from most of the things you talk about when you're on the clock, so to speak. So have you had fun?
Michael, great fun. I got to tell you something. You are so valuable in this industry. And I want to throw this out there. Talk radio is not going anywhere. I want people to understand that it's not. People like you are keeping it alive. I'm doing my level best to keep it alive and well. Because of all this other stuff that we have out there, it doesn't mean that what we do as the foundation is on the brink at all. I think that talk radio lasts forever. And again, your voice, your strength, your knowledge, and your compassion for it is so important to all of us. I had a ball. We didn't talk about politics once. I loved it.
And there you have it, a conversation with Joe Pags Pagliarulo. You can learn more about him at joepags.com. Up Close, Far Out is a presentation of Talkers Media and a production of Good Phone Communications. I'm Michael Harrison. Our producer is Matthew B. Harrison. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved.